something bad happens, I get down like everybody else, and I struggle and I ask why and I ask for guidance, and I don't always make the perfect decision, even today. But I'm grateful that God is a forgiving God, that God is a God of grace that knows where you are mentally.
Welcome to Be a Baller, where we're building a lifelong legacy for our families, communities, and the world. Your host, Coach Tim Brown, is excited for you to join him on this journey. On each episode, we'll be talking about how to be intentional about building a lasting legacy. We'll be exploring what it means to leave a mark that goes beyond just our lives, but has a positive impact on those around us and even generations to come. So, if you're looking for inspiration, guidance, and practical tips on how to build a lasting legacy that makes a difference, then you're in the right place. So grab your earbuds, get comfortable, and let's dive in. It's time to be a baller.
Welcome to Be a Baller, where we talk about building a lifelong legacy. I'm your host, Coach Tim Brown, and today I'm honored to have an exceptional guest who embodies what it means to building and making a lasting impact in our communities. Please welcome Commissioner Kevin Boyce, President of the Franklin County Board of Commissioners. Kevin, welcome to the show.
It was good to be here. I love the conversation.
Yeah, you co-founded a bank.
Adelphi Bank.
30 years.
Yeah. First Black-owned bank in America, 30 years. And a lot of people ask me kind of like what inspired.
Yeah.
And, the story is actually pretty good. I take people back to March of 2020.
Okay.
And COVID was happening. George Floyd had passed away. And if you think back to the media during that time, myself, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, and Shannon Hardin went down to the protest to encourage peaceful protests and ended up being pepper sprayed by Columbus police. Wow. Made national news, and it was a situation where we were just trying to help get the crowd in order because it was growing, and we got pepper sprayed. And later that night, Tim, I'm at home trying to get the pepper spray off my skin, out of my hair. And my friend calls me and we're talking about what happened. And, he says, why is this still happening in America? Why are we still dealing with these kind of problems? And I said, well, until we really get at core issues like wealth gap in America and access to capital, allowing people to buy homes, to build wealth for the next generation, we're always going to cycle back on these issues. And I said, so we need more Black-owned banks. And he said, he's not Black. He said, why don't you start one?
Right.
And I was like,
who better?
I was like, let me call you back. And I got online and typed in, how do you start a bank? And it said two things. It said, one, that banking is the second most regulated industry on the globe.
Wow.
Second to nuclear power plants.
Yes.
It also said that, number two, it is one of the most expensive businesses to start and complex. So I started that day, write a business plan and development. And, today we're in our second year, we're in our third year of being an existing bank.
Yeah, it's awesome. There's a story behind that bank as well, the name.
Yeah.
I think the name is still, I think there's a story behind it.
It is.
A story behind that.
So Adelphi is Greek for brothers. So you got to think of it that way. The brothers bank.
Right.
So that's first part, first secret part. But Adelphi, in the early 20s in Central Ohio, Adelphi Loan and Savings Bank was started by several Black men in an organization called the Boule. They created this Black bank because none of the businesses that people wanted to start, they could get loans from majority banking institutions. So they started this Adelphi Bank, the Brothers Bank, Loan and Savings Bank, to help build what became a catalyst to the area of the Mount Vernon or King Lincoln area of a lot of the businesses that existed. That bank unfortunately went belly up during the Great Depression. But as we were building the bank, we discovered that history in Central Ohio. And then it turns out the location where we were targeting was where they were located.
Wow.
And this company was building a new building over the spot, but they also had saved the facade that says Adelphi Loan and Savings Bank on it. So that's today where the restaurant is there. It's called Waves. So that's really where the bank was.
Okay.
But we're just on the same block on the end. It's just lineup of how the building was built and the size we needed was on the corner. But yeah, so that's the history
lesson. Yeah. Commissioner Boyce, I know you grew up right here in Central Ohio, in your hometown. Can you talk about your family and the village that raised you?
Thank you for asking that. My story is like a lot of, unfortunately, American Black family stories where I was raised by a single mom. My dad, Henry Boyce, he was a two-time Vietnam Marine veteran who came back to his own community and had his life taken at an early age. I was 7 when that happened, when he was murdered. And so it really left my mom to try to kind of struggle and figure out how to navigate, the 70s with 3 kids. I was the youngest. And to try to figure out how to just work through that time. This is 1978. And, but she did, she worked 3 and 4 jobs, and did the best she could. Like a lot of families like that, we struggled with different things. But I was fortunate because I had teachers and coaches and a grandmother that really stepped in to fill the void of not having that whole family and even having the trauma of having lost my dad at an early age. And so, when you say village, that's real for me because there are so many people. The list is so long of the people who had some type of seed in my life for what we would classify as success today. I wouldn't be where I was. I think of, and it's not the obvious. I mean, certainly I had in high school football coaches, basketball coaches, track coaches that were good to me. But even before that, when I was 7 and my father was just killed, I had recreation leaders like James, and I don't remember James's last name, but James, who made sure I was at the recreation center every day and checked on me and brought me lunch because he knew we didn't have food at home, and he encouraged me to come back every day and helped assure me that I had special athletic ability that I'd be able to do something with, and it gave me that mental strength to work harder and to develop that. And so as a result, I was fortunate. And again, a bunch of coaches and teachers along the way, but I think back to James because he was the first one to really seed that in me. And then I had the fortune of being a Division I college athlete, and that is a unique group to be in. But I look at it as like the village you talked about. There was James, there was Coach Howard, there was Coach Miller, there was Coach Smith, Coach Steele, Coach Williams, Miss Beck, I had so many teachers, Miss Ashmore, Mr. Osborne, Mr. Nixon, who all one way or another were very much a part of helping me, whatever it is they saw in me. Lord knows what that was. Right. Whatever it is they saw in me, they nurtured and encouraged, and so today I know that I wouldn't be where I am today without folks like that playing a role in my life.
Yeah. It's something as you were sharing, I was just thinking about all the men that you mentioned. All the men models. I taught 5th grade boys for 6 years. My motto for me teaching was my 6th grade teacher, Mr. Clayton Burrows. Okay. First African American male teacher I saw. When I saw Mr. Burrows, I said, I want to be just like Mr. Burrows. And I tell guys, I said, as men, as young boys, we'll see a man. And we say, I want to be just like that man.
Absolutely.
And we spend the rest of our life trying to be like that man. I'm still trying to be like Mr. Burrows. We still talk today, Wow. He still got me beat up. You talked about athletics, and the word on the street says you were a pretty good athlete there in high school, over there at East High School. You talk about you received a track scholarship and all that. Can you talk about the life lessons you learned from being a part of that team?
It's funny you say that. So I started off at Brookhaven High School so I grew up in Linden. But when we had a lot of issues, we were homeless at one time. We had just many, many issues. So I would go back and forth with my grandmother who lived in the Mount Vernon area. And so it was Linden or Mount Vernon. And so when I was with my mom as Linden, I was at Brookhaven, and we were bused out to Brookhaven. And then I had an incident, a fight that I got in and got in some trouble. And then I had to transfer permanently out of Brookhaven and go to East. And, when you're at that age, 15, 16, you don't have a clue, at least I did, about the things in life that matter or are important. And so as I think about what I learned from athletics, when I think about going on to be a Division I college athlete and being able to be all conference and compete at a very high level, I think if there was one thing that it taught me is it's not about how you start off in life, it's how you finish. And you can determine how you finish. You can't control how you start off all the time. And in track and field, in races, oftentimes the start is meaningful in the race. But at the end of the day, it comes down to how you cross that finish line. And so, you know, I do that. I think about that in the mental sense too. You know, and you think about the lessons that you learn on the field, on the track, on the court, and they are rooted in adversity. You know, if you are losing, you get up and you fight harder. Right. If you're not that good at a certain thing, you work to get better. If you are good at something, you work to perfect it. And I think all of those athletic lessons and stories have transferred into my principles of how I go about life. And they've been meaningful contributors to, I mean, think about it. I was just a little kid in the hood who his father was murdered when I was 7. I grew up around a lot of drugs and violence. I never dreamed that I would one day own a bank. I never dreamed that I'd one day be the treasurer of the state of Ohio at 37, or the president of their county commission, or the first Black commissioner in the history of Franklin. I never, those things seem like a far off destiny or experience, but yet they're true. And any young people listening, I want you to know that you don't know where your life is going to take you. It will have ups and downs, and it will have, you know, falls, and you will have heights, but it's more about how you finish. It's taking those experiences all along the way and learning from them, and more importantly, grow. And I got to tell you too, I haven't perfected any of that. Right. I'm still growing as a person. At my age today. I won't say what it is, but at my age today, I will tell you, there's not a day goes by I don't learn something about life. And maybe now at this age, I'm much more sensitive to life lessons, where I absorb them easier, and I realize what I don't know, and I realize what I do know. And that's maybe the difference between the younger Kevin and the older Kevin today. And I wish I had known some of that when I was younger. If I could go talk to my younger self, I would say something to that effect. I'd say, hey, little buddy, look at me when I'm talking to you here, and I'm trying to tell you this is going to be for your own good, man. You know, I'd say, trust your gut and instinct. I'd say, you know, if you work hard and give it all you got, even what appears to be failure isn't. I'd tell you that, you know, always shoot high, aim high, you know. And, you know, when you set the standard that you know you can achieve just so you can feel good about yourself, you are doing yourself a disservice, you know? And so, I mean, those are the basic things I'd say I learned from athletics.
Right. Well, that's powerful. You know, one thing when you look in that mirror, like I look in the mirror, I say, thank you, young Tim Brown. You know, being so old as Tim Brown can enjoy his life. You know?
I look at myself, I say, that daggone young Kevin, I wish you had I wish I was where you were, because I'd be like, boy, I wish I could just knock you upside your head, buddy.
But when you look back on it, though, all that the young Kevin went through is helping.
No question.
All that.
And you know, the other part about it, Tim, that the even better beauty about that for the young Kevin is I've got 2 sons, and I can impart that wisdom to them, and I can help. They're going to have their falls, and they're going to have their heights, but I can help them through it even better. And, you know, my oldest son is a 2-time Ivy League graduate. And I remember when he was when we were going through the college process, and I'm sitting there thinking, we're on college of Harvard and Yale and Brown. And every time we sat on one of those campuses, I would get choked up to think, when I was that age, I was still dealing with the remnants of my father being murdered. And just, I didn't know if I was going to college. I didn't know what was going on. There was so many different things going on. And here we are, next generation. And we're on campus of Harvard. And he's really considering Harvard. This is not just like an experience. Like he has choices and options that I think, and to me, that's really life's beauty. You know, when you can pass on to the next generation an even better pathway and experience in life than yours.
You know, as we continue our conversation, what I'm hearing is, can you talk about the role that faith has played in your life? I'm sure that, I'm sure you had those times when, like, God, why me? And those type of experiences.
That was about 10 minutes ago. Yeah. Yeah, we talked about it, times in life. I was saying that on the way over here. Yeah. I was like, oh, perfect. Christian Center. I need to be here. Well, one, there's not a day goes by that I don't thank God and try to recognize the gifts that he's given me, but more importantly, try to recognize the pathway that he has set for me. And I'm so grateful through all of the valleys that I've been through in life I'm so grateful that all of the valleys that I've been through in life, to know that he's watching over me, to know that I'm where I'm supposed to be, and to know that I'm that there's a higher expectation even after that experience, good, bad, or indifferent. And so, when something bad happens, I get down like everybody else, and I struggle, and I ask why, and I ask what, for guidance, and that kind of thing. And I don't always make the perfect decision, even today. But I'm grateful that God is a forgiving God, that God is a God of grace that knows where you are mentally, and I can hide that with you.
Right.
I can come in here and smile and act like my day has been okay and good.
Right.
But he knows. He knows the struggles that I've had today, and he knows that he's got something else in store for me. And whatever it is, he's given me the mental electricity to keep moving and keep going, and to be honest with you, to serve. I always pray that I always say, God, help guide me to do the things that you put me here to do, so that I make the right choices, the right decisions, and then deliver what you created me for to do, because that's what I feel like life's journey is all about, is figuring out what God has put you on this earth to do.
Commissioner Boyce, you've truly been a trailblazer in public service. Some of the roles that you've had, and just the opportunities and the doors you've opened for others. Can you, throughout your distinguished 30-year career in public service, what advice would you give to those who are just starting on this journey?
Ooh, okay. That's a loaded question right there. I mean, I have a lot of young people that work for me now, and what I tell them now is, let's start you off right, learning to do things in the right way, so that as you matriculate mentally in your career, you can build off of every experience. And so it's not about the mistakes you make. My staff, they know that they can make a mistake, and I'm going to get after them about it, but we're not going to live in that space. And I'm not going to judge them on those things. I'm really going to judge you on how you move forward. I'm really going to judge you on how you recover from, a little stumble. And so, I just try to tell them, be focused on your growth. And that's partly my responsibility too. It's great that I have a group of staff people that kind of help me deliver the job. But at the end of the day, we're in this together. It's as much my responsibility to help you grow as a professional as it is you to help me deliver the job I'm in today. And I think if we understand that, your growth and my experience to deliver the job is going to match one another, and we're going to have a good experience. And I feel like I preach that with them, and I think we get results that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your experience in public service started young. What was that light bulb moment where you said, you know what, I want to do this?
And that never happened. Yeah, I still be thinking, what was I thinking trying to get into politics? Okay, so that's interesting too. So I was in college,
right,
in the University of Toledo, and I had a professor.
Okay.
And it was a black guy. His name was Jack Ford. Jack Ford later became the mayor of Toledo, but Jack Ford, my professor, and I was in class, took this political science class. I was the accounting major at the time, and I took this political science class. Let's see what this is about. And he's talking about the government process, and I'm in the front row like, wait a minute, hold on. But when you do this, why does this happen? And I'm like, well, wait a minute. And he's like, all right, enough questions. Talk to me after class. So I waited for him after class, and I walked him to his car. And I'll never forget, we got to his car, and he said, look, I could tell from the minute you stepped in my class that there was something unique about you. He said, just stick with it. And so long story short, I won't go into all of it, but years later, as I was graduating, that was like my freshman, sophomore year. Years later, when I was graduating, he called me and he said, hey, you graduate now. Why don't you come work in politics? And he actually offered me a job. Wow. And I came back to Columbus, and he was a state rep at the time, and I ran his office. And I think, back then, and he was a big guy, but he was a very well-known leader in Northwest Ohio. And he said to me, I never forget him sitting down to me, he said, I want you to go into politics. I think you should go into politics. And I said, me going to politics? I don't think so, And he said, yeah, you built for it. And he's like, you're going to go a long way in politics. Wow. And you're going to do very well. And I was like, really, me? And he was like, yeah. And so I worked for him. Then I was promoted as, policy staff. Then I was promoted to chief of staff. So I was like 26 and I was chief of staff in the House of Representatives. Wow. And then Coleman runs for mayor. He was on city council. Mayor Coleman runs for mayor and creates a vacancy on city council. And everybody in the community start coming to me and say, you should run for this seat. You should run for this seat. So I go for the appointment. I don't get it the first time. A guy named Fred Rancier gets it. And but I knew that I had interviewed so well because everyone was like, you should have got it. Like he's much more experienced than you. Right, and he's a great leader, Fred Rancier. But anyway, so he stepped down after about 6 months because he had some family issues. But they all came to me and said, well, you're the guy, you get an appointment. And so here I was, 27, 28, getting appointed to Columbus City Council. Wow. The city I grew up in, and that's when I feel like I made the choice of a career in politics. I thought, okay, Jack was right. I guess I'll do this. I guess I'll, at the time, I just wanted, like everybody else, maybe to raise a family, live a respectful Christian, good life, and just kind of be a good person, good citizen, And never did I expect to have the ability to impact the quality of life for other people in this way in public service. So I don't know if there was ever a light bulb, but I definitely, there were moments where I knew I was in for the long haul. Yeah.
Now you put that good old accounting degree to work as well,
Yeah.
Being a state treasurer and working on Wall Street and all that. How has that helped shape kind of what you do now today?
Well, I ended up switching majors to, so I was a accounting major. Then I switched to political science after, and then in my master's is public finance, but I think it's definitely shaped me. I think there was always a natural sense of financial acuity with me. And my mom and my grandmother used to talk about how as a kid, I always had money saved up. I always had money. I always had resources to do. And they would be like, where did you get this money from? Like, what are you doing? My mom said, I used to borrow money from you. You remember? And I'd be like, yeah, I remember, And so I think there's an element of a natural element to it. You were talking about a friend of mine, Tom Gibson, I grew up with. Yeah. And one of the stories about him is about me, being protecting him from a bully. And there's another story I'll share about, but connected to it is the issue that took me out of Brookhaven and put me at East High School, which was a fight that I intervened with a guy that was getting bullied, and I ended up in a fight with the bully and some other people, and it turned into a big melee, and I got arrested, and I got a charge of gang fighting. When I was 14 or 15. But I'll never forget my teacher. My teacher came down to advocate for me in court during the trial, during the trial process. And her name was Miss Beck. And she said, he comes from a community that's really challenged. It was at Brookhaven. And she said, but he's gifted mathematically. And I was over there like, I am? What are you talking about? I remember her saying like, he is gifted mathematically and that I believe that if you give him a chance, he's going to have a role or a job in finance or in accounting or in something number oriented. And so it all does kind of add up. My mom, my grandmother said it. And then I just remember my teacher, Miss Beck, saying that during the situation where I had dealt with the bully.
Something how the Bible says all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. Obviously, God had a purpose in all of that, and look at you now, But, you in your role as a county commissioner, you started a program called Rise. Can you share about that particular program, some of the others?
Thanks, Tim. Rise is an organization that we created that exclusively focuses on ideas to challenge and address poverty and racism. When I first started as a commissioner, and I was the first Black commissioner in history of Franklin County in 2017, was elected. In 2016, elected, started in 2017. And immediately, I wanted to get at the issue of disparities in poverty around race. Central Ohio has less than 30% minorities, but when you look at the welfare rolls and you look at correctional institution rolls, all of those are disproportionate to Black people. And I wanted to find ways to really get at it. My colleagues, John O'Grady and Marilyn Brown at the time, we huddled up and we agreed that poverty and racism was going to be at the core of our mission. And so we did this whole study that outlined strategies to try to create jobs, to address education, housing, infrastructure. And at the end of the convening, I said to everyone, yeah, but what's the big idea? We know we need better paying jobs. We know we need more affordable housing. We know we need, better access to quality health care. But what is the idea that's going to address racism and poverty and the disparities that exist with our race? And I said, we need an organization that essentially is the think tank to take big ideas and try to pilot those and see just what we can do if we think outside the box, we think big, and really try to do something differently than what we've been doing. It is not simply of giving you food stamps that's going to help change and sustain your life. It's not simply about access to Medicaid and other things. It is about providing families and people with the trajectory to do those things on their own, to be able to have a good paying job on their own. And so Rise is exclusively created to try to take ideas, germinate them into meaningful ways of addressing poverty and racism. And one of those that Rise is doing as an example is a program called Motherful, which basically is a stopgap for single moms that run into emergencies or situations. You're a single mom with 3 kids and the transmission goes out. What do you do? That's $3,000 now. Tim, I had a mom that came to me. She worked for Franklin County. Okay, she had 2 kids, and so a good paying job working for Franklin County. And she said, "I just got a promotion." And she had tears in her eyes. She said, "I just got a promotion." And I said, "That's congratulations, Sergeant Hartway." But she said, "No, I can't accept it." And I said, "Well, why?" And she said, "Because if I take it, it'll raise my income and I'll lose the child care subsidy that I get. And so I can't take that because that's more meaningful to me in my household to have child care subsidy. So I'm going to have to reject the promotion." And so I went to our JFS people. I said, that just can't be. We can't do that to her. And they say, yeah, that's basically the federal guidelines require that. But then they noticed something. Okay. They were like, wait a minute. She's pregnant with her third. She was pregnant. She had a belly that said she was pregnant. And she's pregnant. They was like, we're going to have to knock her off. She can take the promotion. We're going to knock her off. But when she has that third kid, she'll re-qualify for the benefits. And so they knocked her off. She took the promotion, knocked her off, and then she had a third kid, and they got back on. And I said, that's absurd. Really? That's absolutely ridiculous. And so Rise is set up, we created Motherful to help mothers like that so they get over the hump. Here she is, gainfully employed, working hard, doing the best she can, and she gets a promotion from it and can't take it. And so Rise is set up to really help solve those kinds of problems so that mother, and more importantly, the next generation of those kids, they have an even better chance to rise above poverty and racism and all the things that tend to set families back.
Boy, you're in here preaching. And that's so real.
Yeah, it is.
So
it
real.
is. It is.
And I think that's why one of your colleagues, Jordan Miller, Jordan sat at the table and he talked about how important, mentors are. We talk about mentors. But Jordan said this, we all need mentors, but you need a sponsor. Somebody at the table. To say, like for you, you had some sponsors say, hey, give him a chance, give him a chance. And that's what you're doing now. You're at the table. You're that sponsor. You say, this is wrong. And you're in a position where you can do something.
Absolutely.
At least,
absolutely.
And not just conversation-wise, can really, really make some things happen. So I applaud you for that, for sure.
And I'll just add, too, I appreciate Jordan saying that. Jordan is my business partner. And, when I first started writing the plan for the bank, you say, hey, I'm starting a bank. I'm going to write a bank. And most people give you that laugh. And you're like, okay, nice wish, young man. Have a nice day. Okay, good luck with that, But Jordan was one of the first people I called. And I said, I wrote this little outline of a plan. I know you've been in banking for, 100 years. Can you take a look at it? And if I'm ridiculous, my feelings aren't going to be hurt or whatever. I just want some feedback. And he said, okay, sure. He calls me back the next day. And he's like, hey, man, he said, I read through this. He's like, hey, I think you should continue to pursue it. I think this is good. I think this is actually going to work. And so then I was like, well, what are you up to these days, George? I heard you retired recently. I was like, you want to join me? And so he did. And so we've been tied at the hip ever since.
That's a blessing. As we come around the corner, this has been a great interview. This is a legacy podcast. What is the legacy of Commissioner Kevin Boyce?
Wow. I mean, I really have to think about that. I've never given that any thought. Because as you're going through trying to solve problems and trying to build a better life for people and trying to be a good person, those things, I just don't think about it. But I've been to a couple of funerals lately, Tim, that have really touched me and made me think about what do I want people to say about me at my funeral? I was at the mayor of Houston, his funeral on Saturday, and he was a good friend of mine. He was a client of mine in the investment banking world. And then I've had relatives die and others. Bob Black just died the other day, and so many other people. And people always say, when you're born, we celebrate your life. And then when you die, we honor your legacy. But it's really the dash in between that defines us. Is what you're doing every day that matters most. And so I'm thinking out loud here. I would say simply that my legacy would have to be rooted in the type of sons that I've raised, because they will live far beyond me, presumably, hopefully. They live far beyond me. And my expectation or my real legacy would be that they are good, productive, strong, smart, Christian, leadership-oriented people, men. And I think I've seeded most of those things in them. They will have to evolve and develop on their own now as adults. And I'm not there around them every day like I was as a child for them. I've only been able to seed them with, I think, the things that we talk all the time. We're very close. But as they evolve and develop into the men that they're going to be in life, to me, that's my legacy, to see them be good people, to see them be compassionate and engaged in the community, to see them, my youngest son who's graduating next month, he wasn't a great high school student. And I was so worried about him. And now he's going to graduate with college with almost straight A's. And every time I see him, and he's such a strong young man who's developed, and he's got his mother. Their mother is just an amazing woman too. So I credit her for it as well. But my legacy would be rooted in what happens with them, and I think watching them and seeing them be good people. And it's not about the accomplishments. Accomplishments are subjective. Right. It's really about, are you a good person? Do you pray before you eat? Do you pray before you go to bed at night? Do you talk to God, on a regular basis? Do you treat people nice? Do you say hello to people? Do you help somebody if you see they need help? Those are the things that to me would be my greatest legacy.
Wow. Well, Commissioner Boyce, I want to thank you for your time as we come to close of today's episode. And I want to thank you for your commitment to service. I hear that word. And when you look up the word service, you're going to see your picture, on all the service you've done for our community. And so we appreciate you for that. As always, I want to thank our listeners for listening to Be a Baller podcast. And as always, continue to build a lifelong legacy. Thank you, Commissioner Boyce, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, my friend.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with family and friends. The Be a Baller podcast is available on all major podcast platforms. This podcast was created by Coach Tim Brown and recorded and edited by the video production class of Worthington Christian High School. Be sure to come back next week as we continue to discuss on how to build a lifelong legacy. Until then, don't forget to be a baller.